Have you ever looked into a dog's eyes and seen a storm it could never speak of, but would still fight through just to protect you? This is not just a story about a child and her dog. It's a story about scars that never fully fade, about a war that followed a soldier home, not on two legs, but four, and above all, it's a story of unshakable loyalty. Welcome to HeroPaws, the home of true stories that move the heart. Remind us of what's worth protecting, and uncover the quiet heroes we often overlook. Today's video is not like the others. It's deeper, more intense, and carries a message that may stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Why would a group of bikers target a quiet little girl walking to the store? Why did her dog, a scarred German shepherd no one believed in, risk everything to stop them? And what if the greatest threat wasn't outside, but rooted in betrayal from years before? Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had an animal protect you in a way no human ever could? Or maybe, have you ever felt broken until someone or something saw you differently? Let us know in the comments. Your story could inspire someone today. And please subscribe to HeroPaws. Every like, every comment, every click is a powerful reminder that you believe in the stories we tell. Stay with us until the end. This one might just change how you see courage forever. The first light of morning crept slowly over the rooftops of Red Hollow, casting a soft golden hue across cracked sidewalks and shuttered storefronts. In a town that once buzzed with life, stillness had become a familiar companion. The lumber mill had closed 5 years ago. The corner cafe where generations used to gather for Sunday breakfast now sat abandoned, its windows covered in brown paper and faded flyers pleading for a grand reopening that never came. On Maple Street, an old wooden porch creaked under the gentle pressure of a child's step. Emily Carter, 9 years old, with shoulder-length auburn hair and a slightly too big backpack, stepped out into the cool air of the morning. Clutched in her hand was a folded grocery list, carefully written in block letters: milk, bread, banana-flavored yogurt. But Emily didn't look at the list. She already knew it by heart. What mattered to her wasn't the list. It was the ritual. Every Friday morning, as she completed her therapy exercises and stayed calm during the week, her father let her walk 3 blocks to Jensen's Market, alone, or not entirely alone. Beside her, walking in perfect step, was a German shepherd with flecks of gray around his snout and a faint limp in his left hind leg. His name was Shadow. To outsiders, he looked like a retired house pet. But to those who knew better, Shadow was once something else entirely. He had served in the military Canine Corps, trained to detect explosives, chase down armed suspects, and guard his handler at any cost. But like many warriors, Shadow didn't return home whole. His last mission ended in gunfire, smoke, and a handler who never made it back. Shadow had survived the ambush, but not without scars, some visible, most not. The military deemed him too unstable. The shelter labeled him unadoptable. But Jason Carter, Red Hollow's aging police chief, saw something different. Jason had buried a son 10 years earlier, Jake, a bright-eyed teenager taken too soon by a traffic accident, while Jason worked a late shift. The guilt never left. When he looked into Shadow's tired, wounded eyes, Jason saw something familiar. A creature still guarding something that was no longer there. He brought the dog home the day before Shadow was scheduled to be put down. It wasn't Jason who made the decision final. It was Emily. She was only 7 when she first met Shadow. She approached the cage without fear, her eyes quiet but steady. "He's not angry," she had whispered, kneeling down, her fingers curling under the metal bars. "He's just sad because his boy didn't come home." No one had told her about Shadow's past. Jason remembered how Shadow, who had growled at every other adult that week, had walked forward and pressed his head against the bars, as if asking the girl not to leave. That was 2 years ago. Now, they were inseparable. Emily was different. She had been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, high-functioning autism. Loud sounds and bright lights often sent her spiraling. She didn't like hugs. She didn't play with other kids, and her words, when they came, were sparse and specific. But with Shadow, she didn't need words. She had learned to regulate her breathing by lying next to him. She matched the rise and fall of his chest. She calmed her storms through the quiet gravity of his presence. As she walked down Maple Street that morning, Emily placed one hand gently on Shadow's back. It grounded her. It always did. The air was crisp. The leaves whispered. From the porch, Jason watched his daughter with an anxious eye. He'd agreed, reluctantly, to let her make the trip again, as long as Shadow was with her and she carried the whistle he'd given her around her neck. He trusted the dog more than he trusted the town. Once, Red Hollow had been the kind of place where kids played in yards until dinner, where doors remained unlocked and neighbors waved from driveways. That world was fading. In the last few years, a motorcycle gang calling themselves the Steel Vultures had moved into an abandoned factory on the outskirts. What began as harmless noise and speeding evolved into drug routes, extortion, and late-night fights outside the old bowling alley. Jason had tried to push back, but with limited manpower and half his officers either nearing retirement or looking for jobs in other towns, there was only so much he could do. Marcus Kane, the gang's leader, had made things personal. Once a soldier, now a ghost in leather and rage, Marcus had his own reasons for resenting Jason. Jason knew that. What he didn't know was that this morning, Marcus was watching. From the rooftop of the old Sinclair gas station, Marcus Kane leaned against a rusted railing, cigarette smoke curling around his scarred jaw. His eyes were fixed on the little girl walking down the sidewalk. Not the town, not the store. The girl. "That your kid?" one of the younger vultures asked, stepping beside him. Marcus didn't answer. He just smiled, a thin, cruel thing. "Looks like she's got a mutt for a bodyguard," the biker added with a laugh. Marcus' smile disappeared. His gaze narrowed. "That's not just a mutt," he said flatly. "That's Shadow." The biker blinked. "You know him?" Marcus crushed his cigarette under his boot. "I trained him." The biker looked puzzled. Marcus turned to face him, eyes like ice under cloud cover. He was supposed to die years ago. He spat over the railing and looked back toward the street. But he didn't. Down below, Emily reached the end of the block, her hand still resting lightly on Shadow's back. She stepped carefully over each crack in the pavement, counting under her breath in a rhythm only she understood. She didn't know that she was being watched. She didn't know that the man watching her once held the leash to the dog beside her. And she didn't know that this quiet morning walk would change everything. Forever. The name Shadow hadn't passed Marcus Kane's lips in years. He had buried it, along with the man he used to be, in the sand-colored dust of Hellman Province. Buried it beneath the gunfire, the screams, and the deafening silence that always followed a betrayal. But seeing that dog again, walking beside the daughter of the man he blamed for everything, was like unearthing a live grenade he'd hidden in his own chest. Back then, Marcus hadn't been the man who now ran a biker gang from a rotting warehouse. He had worn the uniform. He had saluted the flag. He had been a decorated handler in the Army Canine unit. And Shadow had been his partner. They had been inseparable. Together, they swept compound for IEDs, cleared blind corners in Afghan villages, and hunted bomb makers through terrain so unforgiving it shredded boots and spirits alike. Marcus had always said, half joking, that Shadow was the better half of their duo. Smarter, faster, more loyal. But then came that day. It wasn't supposed to be a combat zone. Intelligence said the house was empty, just a stash point for abandoned supplies. They were supposed to sweep it, confirm it, and move on. But Marcus had made a choice. The reports had warned a possible insurgent presence. But instead of calling it in, he went ahead, looking to impress command, to finish fast, maybe to earn a commendation. He opened the door, and the world went white with flame. The blast knocked him into a wall. His ears rang like broken church bells. Smoke filled his lungs. And through the haze, he saw a young private, barely 20, pinned under debris, screaming for help. He also saw Shadow, his own dog, bleeding from the shoulder but still on his feet, barking and snarling at unseen threats. Marcus had the choice, rescue the private or save himself. He ran. That night, in the medic tent, no one asked questions. The private was dead. Shadow had been found hours later, still guarding the boy's body, refusing to let anyone touch it. He'd torn into 2 soldiers before finally being sedated. Marcus was reassigned within the week. No charges, no questions, just silence. They didn't want a scandal. He didn't want a conscience. He came home different, hollow, angry, restless. When the military sent word that Shadow had been deemed unfit for duty and would be euthanized, Marcus didn't lift a finger to stop it. But the dog hadn't died. Someone else had intervened. Jason Carter. Marcus remembered the name from his early academy days. An idealistic cop, the type who followed the rulebook even when the rulebook didn't make sense. They had crossed paths briefly when Marcus left the army and tried policing, but it hadn't lasted. Marcus didn't take orders well. He didn't care for paperwork or restraint. He lasted less than a year before being investigated for excessive force. It was Jason who had filed a report. Jason who testified. Jason who got him kicked out. From there, Marcus's descent was fast and ugly. First alcohol, then pills, then the Brotherhood of Outlaws, engines, and dirty cash. The Steel Vultures became his tribe. The factory on the edge of Red Hollow became his fortress. And Shadow became a memory he thought he had erased. Until now, Marcus ground his teeth so hard his jaw ached. He hadn't known the dog was still alive. He certainly hadn't expected to see him walking beside Jason Carter's daughter like a family pet. He felt sick and furious. It wasn't just a dog. It was his dog. And Jason had stolen that too. Back at the Carter home, Jason sat at his desk, eyes staring blankly at the screen in front of him, though he wasn't seeing the words. Emily should have been home by now. His hand hovered over the phone, debating whether to call Sarah, his wife, or not. She was at work at the small clinic, where she served as the town's lead nurse. She'd always been the calm one, the voice of reason, the one who reminded Jason that letting Emily learn independence was part of healing, for her and for him. But something felt off today. His gut, the same instinct that had kept him alive in countless close calls, whispered that something wasn't right. He stood and walked to the window. Still no sign of her, just the empty sidewalk, a few falling leaves, and the wind picking up in sharp bursts. He knew Marcus was back in town. The sheriff's office had gotten wind of the vultures, moving product again. Illegal arms, maybe drugs, definitely intimidation. Jason had tried to gather enough evidence for a warrant, but the town was too small, the resources too few, the influence of men like Marcus too large. He hadn't told Sarah just how bad things were getting. He hadn't told Emily anything at all. He didn't want her living in fear. God knows she had enough of that already. Fear of noise, of crowds, of being touched when she wasn't ready. But Shadow had changed all that, or at least made it manageable. Jason thought of the day he brought Shadow home. The dog was a mess. Underweight, hostile, jumpy. 3 shelters had refused to take him. One had already scheduled the injection. But when Emily had walked into the room that day, it was as if something passed between them, a current no one else could feel. "He's broken, too," she had said softly. She didn't say it with pity. She said it like someone recognizing her own reflection in a cracked mirror. From that moment on, they were bonded. Shadow slept outside her bedroom door every night. He walked beside her to therapy, waited patiently while she practiced breathing exercises, and barked only once, and only gently when someone got too close. But that was before this morning. Now Jason's heart thudded with unease. He grabbed his badge, his keys, and the service pistol he rarely used these days, and stepped onto the porch. It wasn't panic. Not yet, but it was close. Down the street, beyond his line of sight, a black motorcycle rumbled into motion. From the alley behind the Sinclair gas station, Marcus Kane pulled his helmet over his head and stared through the visor at the road where Emily had just turned the corner. "She's got no idea what's coming," he muttered. Behind him, 3 other vultures revved their engines, the sound echoing off rusted buildings like thunder. Shadow would protect her. Marcus knew that, but not forever, and certainly not from him. As the bikers rolled out of the shadows and onto the sunlit road, Emily Carter's morning walk was about to become something else entirely. The day had warmed quickly. Emily Carter moved carefully along the sidewalk, counting cracks in the pavement as she walked. Her fingers grazed a chain-link fence lining the abandoned parking lot of the Sinclair gas station, now overrun with wildflowers, rust, and ghosts of a livelier time. Beside her, Shadow kept perfect pace, his head low, ears twitching, not from fatigue, but from instinct. He was listening, watching, calculating. Emily didn't notice. She was focused on her breathing, on the rhythm she'd practiced with her therapist. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Keep the world small, her therapist had said, one step at a time, one breath at a time. But even as she walked, Emily felt a faint tremor in the air, a subtle vibration under her shoes. It came again, and again. She stopped. Shadow stopped too. He stiffened, and then she heard it, the low rumble of engines, louder, closer. She turned her head just as 5 motorcycles peeled out from opposite corners of the intersection, engines growling like beasts loose from their chains. 2 appeared from behind the diner ruins, 2 from the alley across the street. 1, the leader, rolled directly into her path from the gas station lot. Within seconds, they'd formed a circle around her. Emily's breath caught. Her fingers clenched tightly around the plastic grocery bag in her hand. Her body went still, but her mind didn't freeze. This was not safe. She glanced up at the man on the lead bike, black helmet, scraped leather jacket, and when he took off his visor, she saw it. The jagged scar running from temple to jaw. He smiled, but not kindly. Well, Marcus Kane said, voice syrupy with menace. Look what we have here. Little Miss Carter, out on her own. Emily didn't answer. Her throat was dry, her body rigid. Shadow stepped in front of her. He didn't growl, not yet, but his entire posture shifted. He lowered his center of gravity, planted his paws, and stared directly at the man's hands, waiting, calculating, the same way he had once faced armed insurgents in a desert across the world. But this time, he was protecting a child who had no voice to scream for help. Easy there, pup, Marcus said, dismounting his bike with practiced nonchalance. We just want to talk. From behind, one of the bikers, a tall, lanky man named Travis, watched silently. His helmet was off, his jaw clenched. He didn't like this. He hadn't liked it from the start. He'd signed up for protection gigs, smuggling, even the occasional intimidation job. But this, cornering a child, it didn't sit right. Marcus was already too close. He took another step forward. That's when Shadow growled. Low, controlled. It was the kind of sound bred in training fields, reinforced by years of tactical deployment. Marcus froze for a half second. His smile wavered. This dog yours? He asked. Emily didn't speak, but her hand slipped into the pocket of her hoodie, brushing against the cool metal of the safety whistle her father had given her. 3 short blasts. Emergency signal. She wasn't ready. Not yet. Shadow remained still, but his breathing changed. Deeper. Measured. Ready. Call him off, Marcus said more firmly now. Do it or he gets hurt. Still, no response. Emily's brain buzzed. Too many sounds. Too much pressure. But something cut through the fog. A memory. Her father in the backyard, practicing commands with Shadow. Guard. Stand. Release. She hadn't been supposed to watch, but she always did, from the window in silence. Now, she opened her mouth and whispered, barely audible, Guard. It was enough. Shadow's growl sharpened. His body shifted forward like a coiled spring. Marcus stepped back. What the hell? He began, but didn't finish. Travis's heart pounded in his chest. He saw it all in a blink. The girl's hand on the dog. The readiness in Shadow's eyes. The storm about to break. And then Marcus gave the order. Dave, grab the kid. The tallest biker lunged. Shadow exploded. No bark. No warning. Just motion. He launched himself at Dave, teeth clamping onto the biker's arm with practiced force. Enough to incapacitate, not kill. Dave screamed, staggering as Shadow drove him to ground. Blood splattered onto the pavement. Emily stood frozen, but not unaware. Her fingers clutched the whistle. She blew. Once, twice, 3 times. The piercing sound echoed through the street. Chaos broke loose. Another biker drew a crowbar. Shadow turned, releasing Dave, and stepped back between Emily and the attacker. His leg was bleeding, but he didn't falter. Travis moved then, not toward Emily, but toward Marcus. "Call it off," he shouted. "This isn't what we agreed to." Marcus spun toward him, enraged. "You soft now, soldier? You forget what side you're on." "This isn't a side," Travis said through gritted teeth. "This is a child." "She's leverage," Marcus snapped. "She's a human being." Shadow's eyes locked on Travis, assessing, measuring, then back to Marcus. Marcus drew a pistol. Emily flinched. Shadow didn't. He stepped forward. Marcus leveled the gun at the dog's head. "Last chance," he said coldly. The world seemed to pause. Travis's instincts took over. He lunged. The gun fired. The shot missed, fired into the air as Travis collided with Marcus, knocking them both to the ground. Emily screamed, a short, stifled cry. Shadow pressed against her leg, grounding her, keeping her anchored. Police sirens sounded in the distance. Marcus scrambled up, blood trickling from his lip. "We're done," he spat. "This ain't over, Carter." Then he mounted his bike, shot one last look at Emily, and tore off down the street, the others scattering in his wake, except for Travis, who stayed behind. Shadow limped slightly, blood trailing from a cut near his flank. But he stood tall. He looked at the fallen biker, Dave, now groaning in pain, and then back at Emily. She knelt beside him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and whispered, "You did it." Shadow didn't wag his tail, but he didn't have to. He had done his job. He had chosen his side, and the fight was only just beginning. The police cruiser screeched to a stop at the edge of the Sinclair station lot. Lights flashing red and blue across the cracked concrete. Jason Carter leapt from the driver's seat before the engine even stopped humming. His eyes scanned the scene with the instinct of a man who had seen too many crime scenes and prayed this wouldn't be another one. And then he saw her, Emily, crouched near the pump station, her small arms wrapped around the thick neck of a German shepherd, her eyes wide but focused. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. But she wasn't okay. Jason's breath caught. "Emily!" he called, rushing forward. She didn't look up, but Shadow did. The dog stood slowly, protectively, his hind leg bleeding, chest heaving from the adrenaline. He didn't bark. He simply stepped between Jason and the girl, just for a second, until recognition softened his stance. Jason dropped to his knees beside them. "I'm okay," Emily said softly without being asked. Her voice was quiet but firm, and that, more than anything, shook Jason. He had heard that tone before, in soldiers, in survivors, in people who'd been forced to grow up too fast in a matter of minutes. Shadow finally sat, allowing Jason to cradle his daughter. "What happened?" Jason asked, but Emily didn't respond. She just leaned into him, not because she was breaking, but because she finally felt safe enough to let go. Behind them, paramedics began treating the injured biker, Dave, whose arm was mauled and broken. Police officers secured the area, took witness statements, and tried to unravel the chaos. But Jason wasn't listening. He was looking at Shadow, the blood, the eyes still locked on every moving target. This dog had saved his daughter. Again, later that night, Red Hollow Community Hospital was quiet. Shadow lay sedated in the back room of the veterinary wing, with a fresh bandage around his flank and fluids slowly dripping into his leg. Jason stood outside the glass window, arms crossed, watching. "Second time that dog's taken a hit for someone," said a voice behind him. Jason turned. Travis Moore stood there, cleaned up bandage, but still carrying the weight of the earlier confrontation in his posture. His hands were stuffed in the pockets of a hospital-issued hoodie. His expression was tight. Not guilty, not proud, something in between. Jason had heard from officers on scene that Travis had helped. Still, Jason studied him carefully. "You part of Marcus's crew?" he asked, voice level. "Not anymore," Travis said simply. "You helped him corner a kid." "I tried to stop it." Jason didn't respond. Silence hung in the hallway. Then Travis spoke again. "You ever do something so wrong?" he said, That even doing the right thing afterward doesn't feel like it matters? Jason didn't answer that question either, because he had. 10 years ago, the night Jake died, Emily's older brother, Jason's first child. Jason had stayed late at the station that night. He told himself it was to finish paperwork, but really, he needed a break. He'd missed a call from Jake's friend, missed a warning, missed a moment his son decided to walk home in the rain. The driver was texting. The crosswalk was unlit. Jason had arrived too late. And no matter how many lives he protected after that, no matter how many arrests or how many programs he started to keep kids off the streets, nothing would ever erase the guilt. So when Travis asked that question, Jason knew the answer. But he also knew something else. Redemption doesn't come all at once. It comes in moments, like stepping between a gun and a child. Shadow knows, Jason said finally, nodding toward the recovery room. Travis looked at the dog. What do you mean? He can read people better than most humans ever will. He didn't lunge at you. He let you close. That means something. Travis swallowed. Then he added, almost hesitantly, Marcus isn't finished. Jason's eyes narrowed. There's more? Travis nodded. He's not just angry about you. Or the girl. He's obsessed with that dog. Says he trained him. Says Shadow was his, like something personal. Jason turned slowly toward the glass, where Shadow now lay still but alert, eyes half open under sedation. You knew him before? Jason asked. No, Travis said, but I heard enough. Marcus told us once that he lost everything because of that dog and his handler replacement. Said someone turned the whole system against him. Jason's pulse slowed, then quickened. That someone was him. Back when Marcus applied for a local police position, it was Jason who had raised concerns. Too aggressive, unstable, too much unresolved trauma. Marcus had taken it personally. He always did. And if he recognized Shadow, if he knew Jason had saved the dog from being euthanized, it all made sense. This wasn't just revenge. It was a long, slow-burning vendetta. Suddenly, Jason remembered something. Shadow's file, the evaluations, the fact that he had failed them 3 times before Jason intervened. What if they weren't real failures? What if someone had made sure he would fail? That thought chilled him more than the night air. He turned to Travis. Do you know where Marcus is now? No, Travis replied. But if he feels cornered, he'll lash out. And he's not afraid of collateral damage. At that moment, Jason's phone vibrated. He picked it up, read the screen, and his face drained of color. Unknown number, 1 message. You still have what's mine. That girl, that dog, that moment I never got. You're going to lose everything, Carter, starting tonight. Jason stared at the screen. Lock down the hospital, he said to the nearest officer. Then he turned to Travis. If you really want to make this right, stay close. In the next room, Shadow stirred. Not from the pain, not from the medication, but from something deeper. Some instinct that told him the threat wasn't over. That the war he thought he had left behind was coming back for one final round. The lights in the hospital hallway flickered once. Then again, and then darkness, only for 3 seconds. But to Jason Carter, standing just outside Shadow's recovery room, 3 seconds was long enough to hear the silence shift. It wasn't the silence of power loss or equipment failing. It was the kind of silence that comes right before everything breaks. As emergency lights blinked back to life, Jason drew his sidearm. His breath caught somewhere between instinct and fear. Get to the secure wing. He barked at the nurse behind him. Now! From across the hallway, a door creaked open. Then came footsteps. Slow, unhurried, purposeful. Jason turned. Marcus Kane stood in the glow of the emergency light, his face partially shadowed, one hand holding a pistol, the other clutched around a remote detonator, its red button blinking softly like a waiting heart. Evening, partner, Marcus said calmly, stepping forward. Or should I say, former partner. Jason didn't move. I figured you'd show, he said. Figured, but didn't stop it, Marcus replied. You're slipping, Carter. Jason's finger hovered near the trigger, but his other hand, It twitched slightly at his side. A code, a signal. He hoped Shadow was awake. Marcus's gaze shifted to the glass room behind Jason. Shadow was awake, lying low, but his eyes were fully alert. "I always hated that dog," Marcus muttered. "Took everything from me. My rank, my career, my respect." Jason spoke evenly. "You lost those yourself." Marcus chuckled dryly. "No, Carter. You lost them for me. You and that daughter of yours playing house with something that should have been buried years ago." He lifted the detonator. Jason's gun twitched. "You touch that button," Jason said, "you don't walk out of here." "Neither do you." In the soft light, Jason noticed something odd. The detonator wasn't a military device. It looked cheap, crude, improvised, like a bluff. And then a voice, quiet but sure, cut through the tension. "He's pretending." Jason turned. Emily was standing at the end of the hallway, arms stiff at her sides, her voice thin but clear. "The button doesn't work," she said. "It's not connected to anything. It's from a garage door opener. I've seen that model before." Marcus flinched. Jason's heart surged. Shadow stood up. The room shifted. Emily didn't move. Her voice shook slightly, but her words were solid. "You're not a soldier anymore. You're just scared. And I'm not afraid of you." Marcus's face twisted. "You should be." Jason took a shot. The bullet grazed Marcus's shoulder. Enough to knock him off balance, but not kill. The detonator dropped and clattered to the floor. Marcus lunged, gun raised, but Shadow burst the recovery room door, a blur of muscle and fury. He collided with Marcus mid-charge, knocking him back against the wall. The gun fell. Jason rushed forward. Marcus reached for a knife at his boot, just as Shadow clamped down on his arm, holding tight. He didn't break skin. He didn't need to. It was restraint, precision, discipline forged through pain. Marcus struggled, fought, but it was over. Officers arrived seconds later. He was cuffed, bleeding, trembling with rage, but finally disarmed. Jason sank to one knee, exhaling slowly. And beside him, Shadow, still panting, still bleeding from earlier wounds, stood tall. Emily walked over, knelt down, and placed her hand on his fur. "You did it," she whispered. Shadow pressed gently into her side. 3 months later, spring touched Red Hollow in a way it hadn't in years. Grass grew again in places once littered with rust and glass. The diner was being restored. A new community center, partially funded by private donations and redirected town budget, had broken ground near the old factory ruins. Inside the Carter home, the living room had been transformed into something entirely new, a recovery suite for Shadow. An orthopedic bed sat beneath the window, where sunlight poured in each morning. Emily often lay beside it, reading aloud from her favorite books or drawing pictures of Shadow in colored pencil. The dog's hind leg remained stiff, his gait uneven, but he was healing. And more than that, he was living. Jason sat nearby, watching Emily speak to the dog in her soft, precise rhythm. Every night, Shadow still slept outside her door, and every morning, he rose to walk beside her, even if it took him a little longer. Travis Moore visited weekly now, clean-shaven, in stable housing, and 6 weeks into a veteran dog handler apprenticeship. He often sat in the backyard with Shadow, working gently with other rescue dogs. "I owe him," he said once, looking at the shepherd. "That dog reminded me who I used to be." Jason nodded. "He does that." One Saturday morning, Emily asked to visit her brother's grave. It was the first time she'd ever requested it. They went together, Jason, Emily, and Shadow. The cemetery was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels full, not empty. Emily knelt, her fingers brushing the letters on the stone. Jacob Carter, 2002 to 2013. "I think you would have liked Shadow," she said quietly. Jason placed a hand on her shoulder. "He would have," he said. "He would have seen the good in him, just like you did." They sat for a long time, father and daughter, with the dog between them. And in that silence, something settled. Not everything was fixed, but something broken had been mended just enough. That night, Jason awoke in the early hours to the sound of movement. He stepped into the hallway and saw Emily curled up beside Shadow's bed, a blanket pulled over her, one hand resting on the dog's chest. Shadow was awake. He looked at Jason with calm, steady eyes. No panic, no flashbacks, no ghosts, just presence, just peace. Jason stood there a while, watching them both, his daughter and the dog who had walked through fire protect her. And as the first light of morning reached across the room, Jason whispered to himself, "Sometimes courage doesn't look like a badge or a gun. Sometimes it has 4 legs and scar and a heart that just won't quit." In the quiet world they built after the storm, what remained wasn't noise or pain, but love, loyalty, and a promise kept. Shadow had done what he was trained to do, but more than that, he had done what he chose to do, and that made all the difference.